Hi there, and welcome to a Papetti Math YouTube video tutorial where I'm going to be teaching you, yes, you, Algebra 1. And in this video, we're going to be looking at our final lesson in our chapter on functions, which segues into linear functions. Now, the first type of function that we'll be exploring in Algebra 1 is the linear function. All linear functions represent relationships that increase or decrease at a constant rate. We talked about that briefly in our average rate of change section as well. There it is. Any 2 points between the average rate of change between any 2 points on a linear function will always be the same. So let's take a look at this next part. Linear functions are in slope-intercept form if they follow this general structure. It says y equals mx plus b. In that equation, m represents the slope, so this is going to give us our slope or our average rate as we've seen in a previous lesson. And b is going to represent the y-intercept. And notice how I circled a plus too, because sometimes that b will be a negative number and it will be a minus. So this will represent our y-intercept. Okay, now that we know that this information and this is the slope-intercept form of a line or a linear function, we're going to look at exercise number 1. And it says rearrange the following equations so that they are in slope-intercept form, then state the slope and y-intercept of each linear function. So we're going to have to do some rearranging here using inverse operations. And let's take a look at what we do first. Again, we're trying to get this so y is by itself. We're going to isolate y in this first equation. So let's take a look at that first equation and see what's stopping y from being isolated. And it's that 2x right there. The 2x is connected by addition. Since it's a positive 2x, we're going to be subtracting 2x from both sides. And that's going to leave us with just y on the left side. That's what we want. We want each of these equations to say y equals. That's a good first step. And now let's take a look at that y equals, mx. So our x's want to come first. So I'm going to take this negative 2x, and I'm going to actually write that first before the 8, because it says to put the x's first and then the number that's by itself. So the number that's by itself is just that positive 8. Now again, I can't combine the 8 minus 2x. It doesn't say 8x minus 2x. These are not like terms. So I'm going to keep them separate. And now I have my equation in slope-intercept form, and it's called slope-intercept form because now I know my slope and my y-intercept. So my slope is the number that is the coefficient of x. So my slope is negative 2. That's the coefficient of x. And my y-intercept is going to be positive 8. All right. So now let's go to part B. And we're going to do that again. But now we have an extra step, because what's stopping y from being by itself? Well, this 4 is definitely stopping it, and this 3x. We're going to use our reverse order of inverse operations. So we're going to look for that addition and subtraction first to undo. And I'm going to write this over here for our future problems too, how we use PEMDAS. But again, I write it this way because it's addition, subtraction, whichever comes first. Same thing with multiplication, division. And we're going to go in reverse order. So we're going to move the addition and subtraction stuff first. So we're going to subtract this 3x. And we're going to be left with 4y is equal to, again, put my x's first, so negative 3x plus 12. And finally, I need to get this y isolated. So this is 4 times y. I'm going to do the inverse of multiplying by 4. And I'm going to divide everything by 4. And when I say everything, I mean everything. So I'm going to do negative 3 divided by 4 first. I can't do that and get an integer, so I'm going to keep it as a fraction. I'll have negative 3 over 4x. And then 12 divided by 4. Remember, I need to divide this term and this term by 4. Both terms must be divided by 4. And this will give me a positive 3. So that makes my slope right here, negative 3 over 4. And my y-intercept is going to be 3. And now in part C, let's look at part C. And again, we have a couple things stopping y from being by itself. We have that it's being multiplied by this negative 10 right here. and now we have this 5x connected to it as well. So again, let's start off by moving that 5x away from the y onto the other side of the equation. Be careful because keep the sign in front of the 10. So it's negative 10y is equal to, put my x's first. So it's in that slope-intercept form, which is y equals mx plus b. Put the x's first, then the constants, plus 20. All right. And then we're going to divide everything by negative 10. Now notice how I did this one where I divided each individual thing. In the previous exercise, I divided the whole thing by 4. Whichever way you're more comfortable seeing is the way that you should do. I'm putting both there for you to see because you're free to do whichever one you find the most appropriate. So now I have negative 10 divided by negative 10. Those two cancel out. I'm left with just y. That's what I want. Just y equals negative 5 over negative 10. That's going to be a positive, and I could simplify that fraction to 1 over 2x. And 20 divided by negative 10 is going to give me negative 2, which means my coefficient of x, which is my slope, is 1/2, and my y-intercept, which is the constant by itself, remember, the sign in front matters. It's a negative 2, my y-intercept. All right. So we're ready for part D now. And again, if I'm going too fast, you can always pause the video, rewind, rewatch, and take notes. But in part D, we have 3y minus x equals 21. So the first thing I want to move is this minus x right here. It is a negative x, so I'm going to move it by addition. So I'm going to add that x to both sides. I'll be left with 3y is equal to x plus 21. Notice how I put my x's first to keep it in slope-intercept form. Now it's going to get a little tricky when I divide everything by 3 because I'll be left with y equals. Now I need to divide everything by 3. Let's go back. In this exercise, we took the coefficient of x, which was negative 3, and we divided by 4. We kept it as a fraction of negative 3 over 4. We took the coefficient of x in part C, and we divided it by negative 10, and we simplified that fraction to 1 over 2. So now I ask you, what's the coefficient of x in this problem? And if you said 1, you're correct. So what we're going to do is 1 divided by 3. And that's not an integer. It's not an integer, so we're going to keep it as a fraction of 1 over 3, and I put my x on the outside. Plus 21 divided by 3 gives me 7, which means in this problem I'll have a slope of 1/3 and a y-intercept of positive 7. All right, now we have parentheses here and stuff, so I'm going to do that, what I did up above before. I'm going to rewrite my order of operations to show that we're going to be solving this one in reverse. All right, so we're going to look for outside the parentheses first because we're trying to get inside these parentheses to this y right here. And outside this parentheses, do we have an addition or subtraction on this side of the equal sign? No, so we did that. Now we go inside. Nope, we don't. We have multiplication or division. Do we have any multiplication or division outside the parentheses? And sure do. We're multiplying it by 4. So the first thing we want to do is we want to divide it all by 4. So the 4 divided by 4 will cancel out. I'll be left with just the 2x minus y over here is equal to, 6 over 4 is going to give me 3/2 x minus 1. Because remember, you're dividing both things by 4, both terms by 4. Now I want to do some rearranging. I want to move all my x's to one side, so I'll subtract that 2x on both sides. I'll be left with a negative y is equal to, well, this is 1.5 minus 2, so this is going to be negative 1/2 x minus 1. And finally, this coefficient here is a negative 1, so I want to divide everything by a negative 1. And when I divide by negative 1, I'm really just changing the sign in front of the number. So switching the sign of negative 1/2, I get a positive 1/2 x. And switching the sign in front of that negative 1, I get a positive 1 there. So that gives me a slope of 1/2 and a y-intercept of positive 1. And finally, in part F, last part of this exercise, we've made it to the end. You've made it this far. Let's keep on going. We're going to start again with that addition or subtraction outside the parentheses, and we do have addition and subtraction here. So we're going to start by moving this 4 right here. So let's start off by subtracting that 4. And now we'll be left with, be careful, -2, bring down the sign of that number 2, times 2y plus 6x is equal to 20. Now we have multiplication and division outside those parentheses. So we're going to undo that multiplication of -2 by dividing each side by -2. We will be left with 2y plus 6x is equal to -10. Nice. We don't have any exponents. We're up to inside those parentheses. The 2y plus 6 was inside those parentheses. So now we go back to the beginning of our order of operations. We go back to that addition or subtraction, which is right there. So we're going to subtract the 6x, and we'll have 2y is equal to -6x minus 10. And multiplication or division comes next, and that's going to be the end of it for us because we are now going to have y equals, which is what we want. -6x divided by 2 is -3x, and -10 divided by 2 is -5, which finally gives me a slope of -3, that's my coefficient of x, and a y-intercept of -5. Wow, this was a lot. We did parts A, B, C, D, E, and F. We isolated y on 6 different equations here, some involving 1 to 2 steps, some involving many, many more steps. And if any of these equations were helpful in understanding how we isolate y and why we isolate y, so we could find the slope and y-intercept just by looking at the equation, give this video a thumbs up to let me know I helped you out in some way. And now you're ready for exercise number 2 in this lesson on linear functions. Thank you for watching.